Want to know one super easy secret for finding gold? We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about rolling rocks to find gold. Now, one of the markers almost universally of past placer and alluvial gold mining is the sign that the miners had to stack their rocks. A lot of times, when they're digging the gravels, there's rocks that are too big to go into their sluice box. Sometimes the rock's too big or like this, but rocks too big to go in the sluice box, and so they had to pitch them aside. And they would, set them aside because if they went in the sluice box, they'd just clog things up and stuff. So like I say, the stacks of rocks are almost a universal indicator of past mining by old-time miners. And I can guarantee you, wherever they mined, they always left at least some gold behind. They did a good job of getting the easy stuff, but they always left some behind. And today we're going to take a look at that. So let me show you some pictures and some examples of when rolling rocks can really help you find gold, and when maybe it's a little dangerous, or maybe it doesn't work so well. So let's take a look at some examples.
Here's an example of just what I'm talking about. This is stacks of gravel in a placer mining area along gold-bearing stream. In the mid-ground in the distance, kind of on the left, is some bedrock exposed. I got some nice gold off of that. And, the bedrock dipped underneath the piles of rocks. And I tossed the rocks aside. And guess what? The bedrock was just as good, if not better, underneath the rock piles. And so when you're finding gold, pursue it underneath the rock pile. Now, not every boulder stack looks exactly the same as every other one. This is from a little stream in California that was rich in gold, but it was narrow, and the miners didn't have a lot of room to just toss their boulders willy-nilly to the side, and so they carefully stacked them up and built walls in order to retain the rock using up the minimum amount of space possible, so it didn't cover the gold-bearing ground. But I've heard of stories of guys where they have these walls like that in little narrow streams, and they tore the walls down and found really good gold underneath because the miners just had no room to work, and so they actually put the retaining walls on top of unworked ground, and when the wall was removed, the gold was still good underneath it. Now, there are places where there are just endless stacks and piles of boulders that go on for acres and acres. And in these cases, those piles are some probably 10, 15 feet deep, maybe even more. You're not going to be moving those. But in these kind of places, I would be looking at around the fringes, because around the edges where some bedrock is exposed, some dirt is exposed, there may be thinner rock piles that are only, a foot or maybe even 2 feet deep, and you could get to those. And of course, the working face is going to be in front of those. And so these can be interesting areas too, just not where the piles are 10, 15 feet deep. This is an elevated bench along a gold-bearing river, and you can see the bedrock that was once the bedrock of the river, and then the miners worked the gravel that was on top of it. But they had limited room, and so, they just kind of stacked their boulders up. And this would be another great place to move aside a few boulders and see if there wasn't some bedrock that the old-timers didn't quite clean good enough. Like I say, these piles of rocks are almost a universal sign that this area was worked for its placer, where it's gold in the gravels. And around the edges of the piles, if you find gold and the best exposed bedrock, you want to push the pile aside where the bedrock dips underneath the pile. And hand stacks of rocks don't just occur in mountain areas where there's active streams and rivers. They occur in the desert too, because there's old-timers were mining for gold in gravels in the desert along drainages there, and the same situation occurred where they had to set their gravels aside, the boulders and rocks that wouldn't go in their sluice box. They had to do something with them, and so they stacked them and set them aside. Sometimes the stacks and the old workings aren't screamingly obvious. Sometimes you have to look at something and read what has happened to see where the old timers worked and what they did. This is an area where they work with dry washers. Let me point it out to you. Here's what you see when you really settle down and take a good look at it. You can see there's some rocks that they pulled out of this little drainage. There's a little drainage that goes from the lower left up through the upper right. And they pulled some rocks out of there and set them aside to get all the dirt out of that drainage. And then they dry washed there on the left. You can see the coarse and the fines pile on the left for their dry wash tails. So they work this, and there's more dry wash tailings up above. And so they work this little ravine pretty good for its gold. I've followed the signs of past dry washers and did some more dry washing myself, and I got some pretty nice gold. And I didn't find that $5 gold piece. That's just for scale. But I got some nice gold out of that. Occasionally, the rocks to be rolled are not put there by old placer miners. This is actually a bench in a gold-bearing stream in Nevada, and these rocks are there naturally. It's just a part of the river where some rock accumulated, and rolling aside these rocks that were put there by Mother Nature allowed me to get to a little bit of gold that was on bedrock. And occasionally, sometimes the boulders in the piles are just too darn big to mess with. This is a pile that at the top is maybe close to 20 feet tall, and I didn't want to dig around at the bottom, and have a 300 or 400 pound boulder roll down the hill on me. That would be just too risky. So some piles are just too risky to go after. But a lot of rock piles in old placer mines look more like this than what I just showed you. And, if you find gold along the edges of one of these piles, you really got to start moving the rocks back and seeing if the gold continues underneath the pile, because it frequently does. Places like hydraulic mines where you've got old piles of boulders and stacks of rocks are very popular with prospectors, and at this particular spot we found a number of nice smaller nuggets, both in the exposed areas that didn't have rocks on them, and then of course we chased the gold up into the piles of boulders and moved the boulders and continued with our success of finding more gold. Normally one can't do this, but this is a private parcel, not a mining claim. That's actually private property, and they had piles that were big piles, and there was gold all around them, and brought in a bulldozer to push aside the piles and give access for metal detecting the ground underneath the piles, and boy, we did really good. Now, you don't need to have a bulldozer to move stacks of rocks. Most of them can be moved by hand, but boy, if you move the right stacks of rock, you can really get into some nice gold nuggets, especially if you're working with a metal detector, and these were all detected in some old hydraulic workings. And all in all, rolling aside a few rocks is an easy way to find more gold.
Now, I certainly practice what I preach. I roll rocks and find gold all the time. And so let me show you a little video of me rolling aside a rock or two and finding some gold.
Well, I did get a signal here in the rocks, and I'm sure you'll be able to hear it. Now that's a signal that's going down and then up. Generally speaking, smaller targets on the SDC will go up and then down. So wee-oo, like that, that's up, down. And this one is a ooh-wee, which generally means a larger target or perhaps something iron. So the probability on this one is that it is iron trash, but there's no way to know. Not very many of the nuggets here have been of any size. In fact, I think the biggest one here that we've gotten, or me and other friends have gotten, has been around 2 pennyweight. So I'm thinking it's trash, but there's not that much trash up here. So I'm in definite dig it all mode. So I will be digging this. So anyway, it's a target, and it was in among the rocks and hidden in under a big rock. So we'll see whether it's trash or gold. And so we'll see what this is. It's still, because there's not that much trash, I'm definitely in dig it all mode. So I will be digging it all. Okay, well, it's out of the hole. you can hear that. So I'm going to go ahead and dig it out. I think it's right here in the pile. Okay, that wasn't it. Okay, it's in the scoop. Let's see what it is. In my hand. Still in my hand. Oh, I felt something heavy. Oh my goodness. That's gold. It's a little bit bigger piece of gold. I'm guessing close to a pennyweight. Excellent. So I got paid good wages for moving those rocks. It only took me a couple of minutes. And I got a nice piece of gold. It wasn't a very loud signal, and it shows you that even a not very large nugget can still give the down-up signal on the SDC. Yeah, you can definitely hear that down-up. Wow. Excellent. Good gold. Yeah. We'll do some more detecting, and we'll find some more gold.
Now, if you want to learn more secrets of finding gold, how you can get out there, whether you're metal detecting or digging and sluicing or dry washing, panning, whatever, you want to learn more secrets about how to really find gold out there in the field, well, hey, I've got 40 years of experience and a college degree in mining engineering. And so I've written a book, and I've got a YouTube channel, and I'm doing stuff on Facebook. So, you know, take a look at my YouTube channel. It's under Chris Ralph, Professional Prospector. Just enter that in on the search, you'll find me. And I've got hundreds of videos with secrets about how to find gold, of places where there's rich gold deposits, states. You know, I've got a lot of videos about where to find gold, even maybe in your backyard if you live in the right kind of state. I don't have every state down yet, but I'm working on it. And, you know, just check through my past list of YouTube channels, and I think you'll be really surprised about the great information that's out there for you to learn to find your own gold. And I'll wish you the best. I hope to see you out there in the field where we're finding some gold together.